In the Drelvani Empire, a woman's worth was measured by a single brutal standard: the children she could bear, for a species that had nearly gone extinct twice in its long history. Once from plague, once from a war that scarred half their worlds. Fertility was sacred. To be unable to bear young was, in Drelvani eyes, the gravest misfortune a person could suffer. Such women were pitied at best, shunned at worst. And no one suffered this cruelty more than Princess Lyra Vendarii. She was the eldest daughter of Emperor Tovan, heir to a throne that spanned 40 worlds. She was intelligent, kind, and graceful, skilled in statecraft, beloved by the common people who knew her for her charity and her wisdom. By every measure, she should have been the most sought-after bride in the galaxy. But Lyra was infertile. A childhood illness had left her unable to bear children, and in the Drelvani Empire, this single fact erased everything else about her. The noble suitors who would have given their fleets for her hand turned away one by one. The other empires that might have sought a marriage alliance lost interest the moment they learned the truth. A barren princess could produce no heir. She was, in the cold arithmetic of dynastic politics, worthless. By the time she was 30 cycles old, Princess Lyra had received not a single offer of marriage. She had resigned herself to a life alone. A princess no one wanted, a daughter her father loved but could not help, the subject of whispered pity at every court function. She had stopped hoping for anything else. And then humanity entered the picture. The Drelvani Empire had recently signed a treaty of friendship with the Terran Coalition. As part of cultural exchange, a delegation of human diplomats, scholars, and military officers came to the imperial homeworld of Drelvar Prime. Among them was a soldier named Captain Owen Hayes. Owen was not a diplomat by training. He was a decorated combat officer who had been assigned to the delegation as a security liaison. A practical man with steady hands and quiet eyes, who had seen enough war to value peace deeply. He had no interest in court politics or noble intrigue. He simply did his job. It was at a grand reception, held to honor the human delegation, that he first noticed Princess Lyra. She stood alone at the edge of the great hall, beautiful in her formal robes but somehow apart from everyone else. The nobles flowed around her like water around a stone, never quite approaching, never quite meeting her eyes. Owen, who knew what it felt like to be alone in a crowded room, recognized the look on her face immediately. He walked over to her. Captain Owen Hayes, he introduced himself, offering the Drelvani gesture of respect he'd been taught. Terran Coalition. Lyra looked at him with surprise and wariness. "You should not speak with me, Captain," she said quietly. "It will not reflect well on you." "Why not?" She gave a bitter smile. "Surely they have told you. I am the Barren Princess, the one no one will marry. Associating with me brings misfortune in the eyes of my people." Owen frowned. "I don't understand. You're a princess. You seem intelligent, kind. Why would anyone?" "Because I cannot bear children," Lyra said flatly, "and among my people that is all that matters." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that no Drelvani had ever said to her. "That seems like a stupid reason to judge a person." Lyra blinked. She looked at him as though he had spoken a foreign language. "You do not think less of me?" "Why would I?" Owen said simply. "Whether someone can have children has nothing to do with who they are. My own sister couldn't have kids. She adopted 3. She's the best mother I've ever known." He shrugged. "Family isn't about biology where I come from. It's about love, about choosing each other." For the first time in years, Princess Lyra felt something she had thought she'd lost forever: hope. Over the following weeks, while the diplomatic negotiations continued, Owen and Lyra spent more and more time together. He showed her how humans thought about family, how they adopted, how they fostered, how they built families out of choice rather than blood. She showed him the worlds of the Drelvani Empire, the world she loved and served, despite the way her people treated her. He learned about her work with the Empire's orphans, the thousands of parentless children she had quietly cared for over the years, the children no Drelvani noble would deign to adopt because they were not their own blood. "There are so many," Owen said one day, walking with her through one of the imperial orphanages she funded. "So many children who need families, and your people would rather a princess remain alone than let her love any of them." "It is our way," Lyra said sadly, holding a small Drelvani child who had run to her. The children, at least, did not care about her infertility. To them, She was simply the kind princess who came to visit. It's a broken way, Owen said. Look at you. Look at these kids. You'd be the best mother in the galaxy. The only thing stopping you is a prejudice that doesn't make any sense. Lyra looked at the child in her arms, then at the human standing beside her, and felt her heart aching with something she didn't dare name. The day came when Owen made his decision. He requested a private audience with Emperor Tovan himself. The old emperor, curious about the human soldier who had been spending so much time with his neglected daughter, granted it. Your Majesty, Owen said, standing tall in the imperial throne room, I'll be direct, because that's the human way. I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. The court fell silent. Nobles exchanged stunned glances. Emperor Tovan leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing. You wish to marry Lyra? The emperor said slowly. Do you understand what you are asking, human? My daughter cannot bear children. She cannot give you an heir. Any line you hope to start through her will die with her. Do you comprehend this? I comprehend it perfectly, Owen said, and I don't care. A murmur swept through the court. I've spent these weeks getting to know your daughter, Owen continued. She's the kindest, wisest, most compassionate person I've met in this entire empire. She cares for thousands of orphaned children that your own nobles refuse to even look at. If I'm lucky enough to marry her, then I'll be the luckiest man in the galaxy, children or no children. He looked around the silent court. And if your people can't see her worth, then maybe it's your people who are blind. Emperor Tovan stared at the human soldier for a long, long moment, and then, to the shock of everyone present, the old emperor's eyes filled with tears. For 30 cycles, the emperor said hoarsely, I have watched my people treat my daughter as though she were worthless. I have watched suitor after suitor turn away from her. I have watched her grow lonely and sad, and I have been powerless to help her, bound by the very traditions I am meant to uphold. He rose from his throne, and now a human, an outsider, a soldier from across the stars, sees in a single moment what my own people could not see in 30 years. The emperor descended the steps of his throne and stood before Owen. You have my blessing, Captain Hayes, he said, and you have my gratitude. Take care of my daughter. Love her as she deserves to be loved. The wedding of Princess Lyra and Captain Owen Hayes became one of the most talked about events in the history of the Drelvani Empire. At first, the nobles whispered and sneered. A Barren Princess marrying a low-born human soldier. It was scandalous, they said. Improper. A disgrace to the imperial line. But something began to change, because Owen and Lyra did not hide away in shame. Instead, they did something extraordinary. They opened the doors of the imperial palace to the orphaned children of the empire. The thousands of parentless young ones that Drelvani society had cast aside. And one by one, they began to adopt them. Not one child, not two, but dozens. The palace, once a cold and silent place, filled with the laughter of children who had never known a family. Lyra, the princess no one wanted, became a mother to children no one wanted. And she loved them with all the fierce devotion that her people had told her she would never get to feel, and the empire watched. The common people, who had always loved Lyra, embraced the new royal family with open arms. They saw their princess, once pitied and shunned, surrounded by happy, loved children, and they saw the human who had given her that joy. Slowly, the ancient prejudice began to crack. Other Drelvani nobles, shamed by the example of their princess, began to adopt orphans of their own. The orphanages that had once overflowed began to empty as families opened their homes. A society that had defined worth solely by the ability to bear children began, for the first time in its long history, to understand that family could be built on love instead of blood. It was a quiet revolution. And it had started with one human soldier who refused to believe that a kind, wise, loving woman was worthless simply because she could not have children of her own. Years later, Emperor Tovan, old and frail now, made a final decree before he passed. He named Princess Lyra as his heir, not because of any child she had borne, but because of the ruler she had proven herself to be. She had changed the heart of an empire. She had taught 40 worlds the meaning of family, and when she ascended the throne, with Owen at her side and their many adopted children gathered around them, the Drelvani Empire cheered for the Barren Princess, who had become the most beloved empress in their history. On the night of her coronation, Lyra stood with Owen on the palace balcony, watching the celebrations light up the sky. Behind them, their children slept, children who had once had no one, and who now had everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked softly. "Marrying me? Knowing we could never have children of our own?" Owen pulled her close and looked back at the rooms full of sleeping children. Their children, every one of them chosen, every one of them loved. "Lyra," he said, "I have more children than I ever dreamed of. I have a wife I love more than my own life. And I helped change an entire empire for the better." He smiled. "Regret it? It's the best thing I ever did." Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, tears of joy in her eyes. The princess no one would marry had found a human who saw her worth when her own people could not. And in doing so, she had found not just a husband, but a family, a purpose, and a legacy that would outlast 1,000 bloodlines. She was, against every expectation of her people, the most fortunate woman in the galaxy. And she owed it all to one human soldier who had simply refused to look away. The end.